Hey everybody, it's Noah with Extreme Terrain. On the table in front of me, we've got the Barricade Trail Runner front bumper with the LED fog lights fitting the 2020 and newer Jeep Gladiator JT. Now this bumper is going to be a great choice for the Gladiator owner who wants some more lighting, some front end protection, and the opportunity to attach some more utility. Just at first looks with this bumper, it's a really low profile option, and I tend to really like that. Now this bumper does stand out a little bit on the stock Gladiator and it really grabs your attention. So if you're looking for that, this is a good choice as well. Now this bumper looks trail ready and I think that's a good thing too. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that we've got two LED fog lights here that mount on the front of the bumper and they are included with the kit for some extra lighting, as well as mounting spots for two D-rings here in the center right there. In the grand scheme of things, usually aftermarket bumpers are installed to give the vehicle some better protection on the trail or just even on the road for daily fender bender protection. This guy is really beefy and most of that comes down to the tubular design overall, which is going to be really strong, a lot stronger than just something out of formed steel. Now, like I said, this is a tubular design and all that tubing is pretty heavy duty steel, and this isn't just a huge piece of sheet metal with poor fit and finish. There's actually a lot of detail integrated into the bumper and the construction overall, and ultimately it's going to come down to the way the tubes fit together. Now this is the same idea as a roll cage, guys. The structure is really stout and the provisions for the winch here on the front are able to support a 12,000 pound unit, and the D-rings are rated to 9,500 pounds a piece. Now those two LED fog lights that come with the bumper are 6,000 Kelvin and they're IP67 rated as well, so they're seriously heat and water resistant. Everything across the bumper, from the brackets to the screws that are included, are powder coated and textured black, and that's going to ward off any rust or corrosion. Overall, I would say that this is a really well constructed bumper and it's going to be a perfect option for the Gladiator owner who needs some reliable utility. This barred bumper falls right around $680, which does fall a little bit higher than some of the other bumper offerings on the site, but what you're getting for the larger price tag is that added utility and the provisions for a really heavy-duty winch. Looking at the install aspect of this bumper, it has an install difficulty of 2 out of 3 wrenches and 2 hours for the install time. There really isn't a whole lot to worry about on the install side of things because next up we actually have an actual XT customer who took the time to walk you through all the steps of installing this bumper on their own Gladiator.
Tools needed for this job are the panel removal tools to remove the clips on the stock bumper, a breakover bar for the stubborn bolts, the provided Allen key for the skid plate bolts. We have our socket wrenches. We have 16 and 18 millimeter sockets, a socket extension tool, and then we have 7 and 8 millimeter sockets, an 11 millimeter socket to help get the Allen bolts on for the skid plate, and then we have a flathead screwdriver for the wiring harness for the fog lights. First thing that we're going to do is remove all these little plastic fasteners. There's a bunch of them all over the top of the bumper, and then there's a bunch down here at the bottom too that we're going to be taking off with our panel removal tool. These fasteners can be a little bit tricky. You may want to use a screwdriver. You can always use these panel removal tools too. It just really takes a lot of patience to wiggle these things out of here. Alright, one down, too many to go. I'm going to try to take all the front ones off first. I'm wondering if I do that, if this front piece coming off is going to make it a little easier to get to these back ones. They're kind of hard to get to with the tool, so here's hoping. And there's some back here. If you have a curved tool like the one I'm using, flip it over every now and then. Sometimes you'll get a better angle when you flip it over. The ones on the bottom are a different type of clip, so you may want to try one of your other removal tools. Alright, I had to switch over to some metal pry bars to get these bottom ones out. The plastic ones were just bending too much. I wasn't able to get enough leverage. There's just not a lot of room down here. Luckily we don't have to reuse these. Safety glasses are kind of nice during this step. If you're like me, you don't wash your Jeep too often, and there's a ton of dirt here. So when these pop out, you get a bunch of dirt that just comes out all over your face and in your eyes. Not fun. Alright, there's just a few of those in that bumper, but we managed to get them all out. Alright, some of these are really hard to get to with the pry tools, but since we're not removing them or reusing them, I'm going to go ahead and drill them out just to make it a little easier on us. Alright, all those clips are out. On to the next step. There's some 8mm bolts down here that are holding everything else on. Now that I got the rest of the clips out, I'm thinking the bumper's just going to come off after I take these out. With those bolts removed, the splash guard comes out. Now it looks like we can get just to the rest of the bolts to get the whole bumper off. Alright, the fog light removal is a little tricky. One trick right here that you can do, this piece is on just a little tab that's connected to the frame. If you slide it off, you're going to have a little bit more wiggle room to work with. And then what you're going to do is take a screwdriver, and there's a little tab over here. You can see it right there. You're going to want to press that tab while pulling, and then that will take it off of there. Mine had a little dirt in it, so it was a little hard to get off. There's 8 18mm nuts on the back side of this bumper. Those have to come off, and that is what will get the bumper off. They're both on each side of this kind of brace here. So you'll need a extension to get back in there for sure. We only have about 8 more bolts holding this thing on. They're right behind here. A little bit of penetrating oil and a longer socket and an extension, and probably even a breakover is not a bad idea for these. They're kind of tucked up in there pretty good. Alright, taking the fog light harness off is a little tricky. There's actually a tab right here if you can see it, and this piece is attached to it. It slides on, but it's actually easier if you take that off, and then you've got a little bit more working room right here. You push this tab right here and just pull this piece out to get them taken apart. One of the more difficult parts for me with this whole install was actually just getting this harness apart from the fog light. I found it a lot easier once I took it off this tab that is sitting here just on this bumper connect piece, and then you push down on this tab on the side and it just slides apart at that point. Now that we all have all those clips off and we have these smaller bolts down at the bottom out, we now can take the actual bolts that are holding the bumper off. They're right behind this area here. There's 4 of them on each side. They're 18mm sockets or 18mm bolts, and they're kind of tucked back in there pretty good. So what we're going to want to do is probably use some penetrating oil and then an extension. And it doesn't hurt to use a breakover bar either, just like this one. Gives you a little bit of swivel here. That's going to make it a whole lot easier to get off, I think. So let's give that a try. These are 2 of the last 4 bolts that still need to be taken off, and then we can just take the bumper right off. While you're down here, it's not a bad idea to just inspect your undercarriage. These are pretty long bolts, so it takes a minute to get these nuts off of here. I just took the 4 bolts off there behind right here, and then another 4 right here. So there shouldn't be anything else holding this bumper on anymore. It should just come right off. I'm just going to grab it by the tow hooks here. Wiggle it up. There it is. Next we have 4 16mm bolts that we're going to remove these inner and outer brackets on the bumper. you have those bolts loosened up, you can actually just slide these brackets off of here so you're not busting. Now that we have the brackets removed, we're going to remove the two 16mm bolts that are holding the skid plate on. Hopefully this just lifts right off. Alright, next to get the winch plate installed, we're supposed to set this between the frame here. There's a couple spacers, I'm not real sure exactly how those go on yet. Here they are, one's an 8mm, it goes on the driver's side. And then there's some 3mm, two 3mm that go on the passenger side. Not real sure how those go on. Probably will make more sense once we get this winch plate in here. Alright, this is a little tricky, so you probably need a helper on it. You gotta get this 8mm spacer in here. Meanwhile, getting this bolt through. We have our flat washer here, a lock washer. We're going to thread this bolt in here. The spacer is loose. I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to be positioned in here. I guess maybe like that. Alright, you're definitely going to need a set of helping hands on this one. Here, scoot that way just a little bit. Okay, I think you can let go. Alright, now we're threading in the top bolt washer and lock washer. Those are all M10 The bolt is 30 millimeters long. You do all this after you stick those longer bolts and nuts in the bottom holes. Alright, next up we're going to take 4 M12 by 35 millimeter stud plates. Those look like that. And we're going to attach them right here. They're going to be held in place by these little plastic kind of stud holder things. And then we are going to try to shimmy this onto the vehicle after this. So, let's put it back here behind it. Place a little bit. Alright. We'll just do that for the other side. Alright, next we need to add these spacers on. Go ahead and put my flat washers and lock washers on too before lifting it in place. Looks like you're in. Okay, just hold it there. It's kind of tricky getting these all lined up. You tip this back like that.
Mm-hmm. That far?
Yes. Alright, with all these bolts that are holding this on, you have to be really patient with them. You don't have a whole lot of wiggle room. They're not quite long enough. So just barely get them till they catch and then try to do the bottom ones. I started with the top. This probably took me a good half hour just to get these bolts lined up. About to get them tightened down and hopefully the rest of this isn't as difficult. Alright, now that we've got the bumper on, we're going to go ahead and switch gears and take it over to lights. So there are 2 LED fog lights included with this bumper. To put these on, you're going to use some Allen bolts and some nuts. Those are going to be M6 nuts and M6 Allen bolts. There's 4 for each one of the lights. So let's go ahead and get those on. Thread that through there. Pop all these through here, put it in place. Get all these bolts started on here. So you shouldn't need a socket wrench. These have the little grooves in the bottom that'll catch whenever you're tightening them. So just as long as you have them pretty tight, finger tight, you should be able to just use your Allen wrench to tighten them up the rest of the way. The fog lights come with a wiring harness. You can see right here it's got the relay and then it's got the terminal connects here. I'm going to go ahead and connect the positive up to this unused terminal here, and then I'll go ahead and connect the negative over there on that side. Had a 12mm socket over here for that terminal. Probably gonna have to swap that out. The other terminal over here is actually a 13mm socket. So I'm gonna need another socket wrench. So this terminal is 10mm. Never mind, that's holding the terminal on. I feel like I should have had to use a breakover bar there, but that was on there really tight. Alright, I'll probably end up connecting that right there. Need a screwdriver for that. Alright, I debated on where to put this little relay. There's a few points I could put it. This seems to be the easiest. I will have to take it off every time I change my air filter. Probably not a big deal though, so I'm going to go ahead and just hook it here. Okay, I'm gonna try to figure out how to get these wires through here. I know I don't want them near any sort of heat source, you know, exhaust components or radiator. There is a hole right here kind of behind the grill. I could probably secure them up under this little rubber gasket that goes to the air box. I think I'll be clear of the hood. And I'll probably come back in here and use some zip ties to kind of clean this up a bit. Maybe easier just to take the whole grill off, but we'll see. Alright, these are going to be coming out kind of on the left side of the headlight. I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, you can see how I threaded these down from the engine bay just out under here, under the grill. There's a whole lot of wire here. I'm thinking I'll probably end up shortening that just to keep everything nice and clean. Fog lights come with a switch that you can run through your firewall. You'll see it has a little on and off button here. There's a little plug down here. I don't know if you can see it. It's right here on the left side or right side of the firewall. Just about probably 4 inches down from this bracket here. All you need to do is just take a pair of pliers and pop that out. And then you can just drill a hole however big you need. Put a grommet on it or use some silicone to seal it back up. The last step to this install is installing the skid plate underneath the vehicle. You're going to need the skid plate, your brackets, and then some bolts. You'll need the original hardware from the skid plate for this one. What we're going to do is loosely install them here and there where the original mounting points of the factory skid plate were. Alright, next we are going to install the skid plate using 5 M6 by 20 millimeter Allen bolts, 5 lock washers, 5 flat washers, and 4 M6 nuts to secure the skid plate. The middle is pre-threaded, so I would start with that one to hold it in place, and then we'll go around the rest of them and tighten those up. Alright, I'm going to hook the bottom of the skid plate into the mounting brackets that are attached to the original mounting holes. You can use an 11 millimeter crescent wrench on this one.
That was the Barricade Trail Runner front bumper with LED fog lights, fitting the 2020 and newer Jeep Gladiator JT. For all things Gladiator, remember to keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.